When you hear about wrestling in the Northeast during the 1970s, one typically thinks New York, South Philly, Baltimore, and Washington, D.C. But there were four other shit-kicking, bloodthirsty cities packed with hardcore, hard-working, blue-collar, smash-mouth fans that were dedicated to the sport of professional wrestling like none other. I'm talking about the people from Cleveland, Buffalo, Pittsburgh, and Detroit. Even though Detroit is kind of scratching the fence on the Midwest side, for simplicity, I'm just going to keep it part of the Northeast because they did a ton of work in these territories here that we're going to talk about. That being the Sheik and the Sheik's guys intermingling with the Cleveland territory and Buffalo territory. Although these territories didn't have the powerhouse popular arenas like the Garden or the Philly Spectrum or the Boston Garden, they did have the Cleveland Arena, which held almost 13,000 people. The Memorial Arena in Buffalo, 18,000 people. One of my favorite places was the old Igloo with the Civic Arena in Pittsburgh, where I've seen many Penguin games. Never saw wrestling there, but that would hold up to 14 to 16,000 people. What a tight place that was. I mean, you really had to shoehorn yourself into that seat. And if you sat next to somebody who was big, Christ, you had nowhere to put your arms in those seats, man. It was horrible, but I would spend the 7 or 8 hour drive several times a year to go see the Penguins play for sure. But in 1969, the NWA territory promoter named Pedro Martinez ran the Cleveland and Buffalo territory. After maybe a couple of years or so, he wanted to break away from the clutches of the NWA. So Pedro and the territory's top babyface, Johnny Powers, pulled their affiliation from the NWA and formed their own territory, the NWF, in 1970. It's a little known territory, hardly anyone talks about. It had some fantastic matches, it had some great wrestlers, great tag teams to come out of there. It was also known as the number one place for pulling the double cross. There was more double crosses pulled in Cleveland than any other territory ever. Some were some huge ones too, some very memorable ones, including the notorious Cleveland Riot that we're going to clear up a few things about the Riot that's been not so much correct with a lot of the information that was out there. We're going to show you the beginning of how that formed and what built up to that, and then the after effects from it. So the NWF territory now consisted of, like I said, Cleveland and Buffalo. Their top singles guy, like I said, was Johnny Powers. He was basically their main baby face there. Carrying over from the NWA into the NWF was their main singles championship, which was the North American Championship. That title would come along to the NWF, and they would also add a World Championship title to that, which was the NWF World Title. The North American title has roots in also Detroit, because Powers would defend it there, and it would also carry over to the IWA later on. That was led by Mil Mascaras. So that title would continue on after the closing of the NWA. It's interesting how this unfolds. Now, already having a strong working relationship with the Sheik was in and out of the Cleveland territory during the NWA times, and it continued on throughout the NWF times. Even though they were an independent company, the Sheik still defended the U.S. title in the NWF territories in Cleveland and Buffalo and their surrounding areas throughout. And also, he would have his guys come out like Bobo Brazil and Killer Brooks and so forth. The guys would interchange and they would all use each other, and even also on their televisions. So enter Pittsburgh. Now, when one hears Pittsburgh, typically you think, it's Bruno Sammartino's territory. And he did buy that territory in 1966 from Tutsman, but in 1970, Bruno sold the company to Gito Mongol, and shortly after, Mongol sold it to Pedro Martinez, and that became the fourth big city as part of the NWF. A lot of people don't realize this, that when Bruno had the territory in Pittsburgh, he ran that like a separate entity from the WWF and McMahon. He brought his own people in. He did his own booking. He had his own people there. So it really wasn't a WWF territory until later on. So now Pedro Martinez now has 4 big cities. And he's got television in 4 different major towns, 4 different states. Jack Reynolds was on the mic for a lot of that. Same Jack Reynolds that was in the WWF in '85 in Canada, and also in the IWA with Tex McKenzie as the announcer, and also Ron Martinez, which was Pedro Martinez's brother. They had big stars like Ernie Ladd, Abdullah the Butcher, Victor Rivera, Waldo Von Erich, like I said, the Sheik is in and out of there, Johnny Valentine, Danucci, Parisi, Eric the Animal at the time, who was Eric the Red later on. Also, Moolah would be in and out of there, Donna Christatello, Killer Brooks. They had the midgets, they had tag teams. It was a territory to behold. I mean, they really knocked it out of the park for an independent, quote unquote independent territory. I don't know why this magazine is there. Sorry about that. But we're going to date this right back until December of 1969. We are 1 month away from pulling away from the NWA, and this is still an NWA territory. And this is Cleveland Arena. The Sheik takes on Bobo Brazil, defending his title, the U.S. title, in the soon-to-be NWF territory. This is an old program from that time period, just before the change of the changing of the guard. So we're just going to fast forward it a month. Could be a few months later. The exact pinpoint, the date of it out of the gate starting is blurred. It could be a few months into it. It could be 4 months. It could be 1 month. But their first champion would be Johnny Powers. Like I said, he would be the face of the territory. And you can see now they have their NWF World Heavyweight Championship title belt. Looks very much like the WWF's title belt. So that was 1969, December, the last of the NWA affiliate in Cleveland. The company would go on to have several different big name champions. Waldo Von Erich would be the next heavyweight champion. He would lose the title here to Dominic Danucci. Here is another program from the NWF, December 2nd, 1971, from the Cleveland Arena, and it's the night Danucci takes the title from Waldo. I thought Waldo was a great champion. Here's a shot of Waldo with the gold belt. Big guy, had a great feud with Bruno. Bruno would also come into town and challenge for this NWF belt in a couple of years. But Danucci would hold it for, I think, less than 3 weeks, like 2.5 weeks. And then went right back to Waldo again. Now, for making their first appearance on the cover of a magazine, Johnny Powers, and he's here, like I mentioned earlier, with the NWF North American Championship, which was previously the NWA North American Championship, defended in Cleveland and Buffalo. So finally getting some recognition now after being in business about a year or so on this issue of September 1971, Wrestling Review. And we're going to look at a new tag team that hasn't really gotten much popularity in the big territories, but I hate to say smaller because they were a powerful company, but the NWF, IWA in the early 70s, had some great teams, and one being the Love Brothers. If you never had the pleasure of seeing the Love Brothers or hearing them in any kind of interview or promo, try to look them up. They're funny dudes. They were heels. They were dressed like hippies. And they were dirty, violent, and they didn't, give much love in the ring. They were a pretty cool concept, and I thought they were pretty wild. So if you're a fan of the IWA, you already know, probably are familiar with them. But the Love Brothers were pretty cool, and you never really hear about Reginald and his brother. Back to another program now. Abdullah the Butcher comes to town, and Ernie Ladd challenges now for Waldo von Erich's championship belt. Some of the programs are sheets, and then some of them are printed inside the program. So the ones I have back, I'll show you. I'm not going to open them all up, but this is February 24th, 1972. Ernie Ladd challenging Waldo. Johnny Powers takes on Papiro Firpo. The Love Brothers takes on the Kangaroos. Bobo Brazil takes on Chris Tolis, and continues on Danucci with Crazy Luke. So just to pretty much rare, hard to find. These programs are really difficult to find. Well, with the lineup sheet anyway. You can find a couple of these. They're in the $50, $75, $100 range. And then, with the lineup sheet, you're looking at more. So they're very difficult to find, and there are not many of them out there to begin with. Now, the NWF territory, the Sheik coming in to defend the title again, and also Eric the Animal, now the champion, who is Eric the Red, a couple of years later. Before that, his name was Eric the Animal. He is taking on Johnny Powers. Powers lost the title to him just a couple of weeks before. This is April 12th, 1972, and 71, and Eric is about to lose the title to Powers on this night here, and pretty decent looking program. They're kind of like the body press programs from the Sheik's territory, and also the IWA parade programs, pretty much the same exact setup. Here's Hans Schmidt challenging Waldo von Erich on one of their first double crosses, and Hans turns on his partner and turns face, and that turns into a war with Waldo. Also, the Sheik defending his U.S. title against Tex McKenzie in this program on April of 29th, 1972. And you see the main event would be Hans and Waldo for the title, and the Sheik and Tex McKenzie. Ernie Ladd taking on Luke Graham, Johnny Powers, and Firpo going at it again. Love Brothers are back on with Danucci and Parisi. Coverage of the Sheik and McKenzie can be found in several different magazines. In particular, Tex wasn't on very many covers at all. I can think of three. I think I only brought one out. This is December 74's issue. It's a little bit later on in the Aftermag's years. But Ben Strong was also a quarterly issue that didn't have many matches that were up to date. New stories, no recycled stories, which was great about the Ben Strong series, but just a little late to the party with a lot of the matches, especially coming from an independent, smaller circuit there, But it's Tex has got the foreign object into the Sheik's head, which is quite different. Usually it's the other way around. Inside the Wrestling World issue, Tex is taking on the Sheik, and there's some color photos in here of the match. Here's rare to see in 1971-72 color pinups and photos, and the Wrestling World were the first to do that for us. Grudge match, McKenzie and the Sheik. Wrestling World loved the Sheik, as we stated before in several other videos. He was on many, many covers, and if he wasn't on the cover, 9 out of 10 times he was featured inside somewhere. So, good looking shots early in the 1970s with some color pinups in there, along with the story of the match with Tex McKenzie and the Sheik. Parade of Champions. Look who's coming to town. Bruno Sammartino, since selling the Pittsburgh territory, now is and has lost the Worldwide Wrestling Federation Heavyweight Championship, is now challenging Waldo for a series of matches. These guys would have 3 matches in total. This was May 18th, 1972 in the Cleveland Arena. Bruno taking on Waldo. Crazy Luke Graham taking on Ernie Ladd. The Fargo brothers, who was Don and Johnny. Johnny was actually Greg Valentine. We're going to see him in a minute also. They took on Luis Arriba Martinez and Dominic DeNucci. Like I said, Bruno would have 3 matches with Waldo. Waldo would lose the first 2, not by pinfall, and he would get the pinfall finish in a steel cage match against Bruno on the final match of their series, which was pretty significant. Bruno, being well known through that territory and also wrestling throughout the Pittsburgh area. He would, travel everywhere when he lost the title, because he'd be in, the Olympic Auditorium with Dick the Bruiser. He'd be out in the Los Angeles territory. He was everywhere. And the NWF was another one where he challenged for the belt, and it's a rare shot to see Bruno here challenging. He would also challenge Harley Race for the NWA title as well, for the short reign that Harley had that belt. He wasn't champion for very long during his first reign. June 9th, 1972, Ernie Ladd now challenging Waldo for the title, and Ernie Ladd takes the belt from Von Erich. And rare match, rare program of that night. Pedro Martinez basically gave Ernie Ladd his career and put him on the map. He started him, early in 71 and made him their champion, and Ernie Ladd became a big name, both face and heel. It's a rare shot of Ernie with the NWF title right here. Good looking close-up shot of him with his first world title since leaving the NFL and becoming part of the wrestling world. Good looking shot of Waldo with the belt. Only picture of him ever featured with the world title is right here on this cover of the Stars of TV wrestler program for the NWF. Ernie Ladd's win from the NWF becomes major news on the cover of Wrestling Review, October 1972. Ernie Ladd wins the NWF crown. Full story is inside. Full photos are inside. Finally, NWF is getting a little bit of credibility through the smaller magazines now. Not really the after mags, as they say, but they would get a few pics here and there, but not very many cover shots for sure. December of 72's Wrestling Monthly. Now, Monthly was also owned by Wrestling Review at this time, as well as Big Book and Complete and Guide. They were all from the Canadian territory, since selling to the out of the country. So they would cover these smaller matches more, and it was only like a rock's throw away from the border, from Canada to Buffalo or from Detroit. So it wasn't too far off for them to venture out to. And you're looking at the first world tag team champions, NWF. That's Greg Valentine down on one knee with his tag team brother Donnie Fargo, and getting the cover of December 72 Wrestling Monthly. Early rare shot of Valentine before he came Greg Valentine. He was just babyface Nelson in the Sheik's territory in 1970-71. We just talked about that in one of the previous videos. And then since then, making the switch over to Johnny Fargo. Wrestling World has a small piece in announcing the new champion, Abdullah the Butcher, would win the NWF world title from Ernie Ladd, and it would be in the regional reporting section of the Wrestling World. Kind of like, the after mags, when they would, do around, what's going on around the territories and around the other states, and matches that took place throughout the U.S. And they kind of did their same thing. They had an Eastern report, Western report in this magazine. But your only shot of Abdullah the Butcher with the NWF belt, and it's a rare one. Finding pictures with him in that belt, good luck. Same with when he won the Sheik's U.S. belt in 74. There was hardly anything. I think the Japanese issues have one. The Japanese issues have this same exact photo also in their issue, but it's not in color. And so I just figured I would show it to you in an American issue, Fall 74's issue of Wrestling World, if you're interested in tracking down some history on the NWF. NWF is moving along quite popular, and they decided to take a chance and blow up pretty big, and they would have actually, this is their first cover. Johnny Powers taking on Johnny Valentine for the North American Heavyweight Championship in their very first stadium attempt, and it was called the Super Bowl of Wrestling, August 12th, 1972, at the Municipal Stadium. What was unique about this is they had 3 rings going with matches all at the same time. They had a ring at home plate, another ring at first base, and another ring at third base. This way, everybody could have a great seat and see all the action, and in between the matches, there was no down matches. There was always at least one match going on, sometimes 2. And there was over, I think they said 20, was it 20 matches? Or I'm trying to think if it was 20 or 30 some odd matches that they had there. Pretty bizarre. I mean, there's nothing like that was ever done. Powers had gotten that concept from the circus, having the 3-ring circus, and he thought the 3-ring wrestling, blah blah, and that ties it into like a circus feel of always something exciting and going on in different points of the arena. Reports were it was 20,000 fans. Some say 14,000 fans. Who knows? The magazines say 14. They listed 20 in other magazines. But main event, Powers taking on Johnny Valentine. Abdullah the Butcher would get a rematch. I'm sorry, Ernie Ladd would get a rematch with Abdullah the Butcher for the NWF title. At this time now, Ernie Ladd is the WWA America's Heavyweight Champion. So it is a title versus title. Match ended in some kind of DQ, I believe. None of the titles had changed hands. But this was your first Super Bowl of wrestling, the first big event, and a ballsy move for a smaller company. You can see back here, it doesn't look very filled, but coming around from first base around home, back around to third, it was pretty full, and even in the upper decks. Killer Tim Brooks challenged Brazil for the U.S. title. Moolah defended her title against Vicky Williams. The Fargos took on Wahoo McDaniel and Chief White Owl. So there were some decent matches. The midgets were there, a lot of ladies matches, and it was overall a success. They just never did another one, which is a shame. I guess the company was, maybe starting to feel the stranglehold of the debt, and things weren't really progressing the way they wanted to. But another cover of Wrestling World is covering the match between Ernie Ladd and Abdullah, NWF title versus America's title at the Super Bowl of Wrestling. And there's some color photos in here as well. Some of these, I pulled these out at one time because I like this photo. So it's loose from the magazine. But Ladd with the America's belt. Ladd also was challenging Pedro Morales for the Worldwide Wrestling Federation Heavyweight Championship as well at this time period. But here he is at the stadium with Abdullah, and good looking color shot for its time. Also, Powers getting the victory over Johnny Valentine here for the North American Heavyweight Championship belt. So there's some decent color shots in this Wrestling World issue here with Abdullah and the cat Ernie Ladd. Wrestling World again picks up another match from that night, and it's Killer Brooks taking on Bobo Brazil. There's no color centerfold in here to showcase that off, but still, NWF is still getting another cover, which is really good. One more program coming at us now. We're looking at the Fargo brothers, the tag team champions. Valentine flexing his young muscles, and Fargo, who always had a fantastic physique, was always put together, and Moolah gets the cover up also. And this is for, I'm trying to see the date, September 29th, 1972. Bruno and DiNucci take on the Fargos, challenging for the tag team championships. The Miller brothers, Bill Miller and his brother Ramon Martinez and Tony Altomar are the challengers. Baron Cicluna taking on Luis Martinez. Victor Rivera makes his appearance in the NWF, taking on the Red Demon, and also a young Larry Zbyszko breaking in, taking on a guy named Tom Reisman. And another rare program, young Larry Zbyszko making his way into the wrestling business via Bruto's territory in Pittsburgh and making his way through the NWF rounds. A little bit later on, after the Super Bowl of Wrestling event, the Pedro Martinez would now have a working relationship with the Rougeaus and acquire part of the Canadian territory. It wouldn't be for very long, but Rougeaus were now involved in the NWF, and he would be taking on the Sheik for the Sheik's U.S. title in this issue of the Parade. And this was at the Buffalo Memorial Auditorium. March of 7th, 1973 on a Wednesday night. And it's Sheik and Rougeau, Johnny Powers defending the North American title against Hans Schmidt, who had turned back to being heel again, Tony Marino, Killer Tim Brooks, Haystacks Calhoun also on the card, Pampiro Firpo, Eric the Animal, and Nick DiCarlo, another Canadian from coming down to Buffalo. Another rare program from the NWF. I try to get these when I can. The issues are hard to find. I believe that was my last NWF program. We're getting into 1974 or so now, and here's where things start to get a little interesting. So there was known throughout, I guess the more of the hardcore fans would know about the Cleveland Riot and the riot that happened in the arena, where Ox Baker got his back of his head split open with a chair. The fans were getting pissed off. But there is a bunch of things that happened before we got to that point. So the Aftermags pick it up. They got Ernie Ladd taking on Powers, June of 74's issue of Inside Wrestling. We need to back it up quite a few months to get to this point to understand why this match is taking place. And this is what's not talked about. So we're gonna pull it back to May of 74. Inside Wrestling, Bruno Sammartino now recaptures the Worldwide Wrestling Federation Heavyweight Championship from Stan Stasiak at the Garden, and here's his back hallway shot of the Garden posing with the title and the graffiti all over his shoulders and chest. Here we have Johnny Powers and Ernie Ladd about to have a falling out. Now, the way it's announced on their TV and in this issue here, an open letter to the fans from Johnny Powers. I'm not going to read you the whole article. I'm going to just tell you what's going on. What happened was Powers was the babyface. Ernie Ladd coming in, young black guy in the inner city towns that of Cleveland and Buffalo, Pittsburgh, all loving Ernie Ladd. They have a black hero. He was the champion. They had someone to cheer from and cheer for, and got over really hot with the fans there. And Powers and Ladd were both runners up for the Wrestler of the Year, or Most Popular Wrestler of the Year, whatever they wanted to call it. Powers was the years prior, and the year before that, 2 years in a row, won that honor, and this year it went to Ernie Ladd. To Powers' shock and pissed offness, and you can tell by looking at his face while Ernie Ladd is holding up the championship belt. Ladd doesn't see he's upset, but the fans do, and you know something is a brewing here. So they embrace, they hug, and the whole time he's got a pissed off look on his face, but Ernie Ladd can't see what's happening. He's just too happy and excited during the celebration. So a couple of nights later, Powers and Ladd are in a tag team match in the Cleveland Arena, taking on Pampiro Firpo and the Sheik. Now, Ladd's getting beaten up pretty good during the match. The Sheik pulls out a pair of brass knuckles and drops Ladd. He's getting pummeled, blood pouring out of his head. He can't get to the corner to tag out. He's in there a good 5 minutes. Finally, he makes the tag to Powers. Place goes crazy. Johnny comes in, beats up the Sheik, has everybody, in their corner. Though all the power now is back on Powers' side. Within less than a couple seconds of pummeling the Sheik, Powers goes to tag out Ernie Ladd, who just happened to step off the ring apron to get his head back together again, wipe the blood from his face, and he's not there for the tag. Well, the guy just tagged in 30 seconds ago after getting beat for 15 minutes with brass knuckles. So that would be the reason he wasn't there at the ring apron. Seeing this, Power gets pissed off, jumps down from the ring, grabs Ernie by the back of the head, pulls him by his hair, punches him in the face, throws him in the ring, and starts beating him up. Fans were pissed off. This was a big double cross. He's like the major face of the territory. How could you do this to your partner? The Sheik sees him beating up on Ladd, and they both start joining in, and they both start beating up Ladd. Fans are getting real hot, to the point now they're like, they're ready to jump the guardrail, throwing shit. Now here comes Pampero Firpo into the ring, the Sheik's partner, looking like he's going to be a 3-on-1. Fans are ready to go nuts. There's just a hair away from a riot. And Pampero does the unthinkable. He grabs the Sheik and starts beating up the Sheik. Place goes fucking apeshit. Never seen that coming. It was a double cross. Never been done in wrestling beforehand. Don't think it's ever been done after that. Where both partners turn on each other during a match. Great concept. Fans went crazy for it. Went over big time. And this started now a war with Pampero and the Sheik. And it also started another war with Ladd and Johnny Powers. So that gets us caught up now to this match. That information, actually, you have way more information I gave you that's in this article, but that article of him apologizing to the fans, saying, hey, I'm not a bad guy, I'm really a good guy, it was my partner, he's the one that did me wrong, and it's not my fault, but everyone knows he's full of shit. It's in this issue of May 74 Inside Wrestling. So, June of 74, why Ernie Ladd tried to make Johnny Powers bleed to death. And it has a story in here about them two having, their feud and what happened on that night. Here's Ernie with the trophy, and here is their match taking place in the ring between Ladd and Powers. And it's all pretty much summed up in this issue, and the back pages. Again, the match continues on. You can read the full story. I pretty much gave you the brunt of the story of what happened there, okay? And one other feud that kicked off in the same magazine that's really not mentioned is Firpo taking on the Sheik. So this was a feud that would go on all across the United States, from down south across the Midwest all the way to the West Coast of California and Los Angeles. These guys would battle all over, and it was a huge turning point for Pampero to be turning a good guy. He would also grab the Sheik's U.S. title in Detroit as well. So great war there. Ernie Ladd now has 3 matches with Powers. Both times Powers takes him out, and they're going to have their third and final matchup. Now, what's happening in the wrestling world, in the magazine sections, is a bunch of, here's one in 1973, a good year or so before the match even begins. Ox Baker, is he a killer? Known for the man to be a killer. Who did he kill? He killed Ray Gunkel and apparently Alberto Torres. Who is Alberto Torres? This gentleman right here, one of the Torres brothers in September of '69's issue. This is the other guy that Ox killed. It's in the magazines. Now you can see this big 6 foot whatever, 300 pound whatever, looks like something from a sci-fi movie, and actually was. Ox Baker, and talking about the people that he killed. And the article goes on. Every major magazine is talking about that, and really put his name on the mark as one of the top heels and most dangerous men in the business. What happens during a match between Ernie Ladd and Powers? Ox Baker comes out of the crowd out of nowhere and comes in and starts beating the shit out of Ernie Ladd. And he gives him what is known as his deathly punch, the heart punch. That is the punch that supposedly killed the other two wrestlers. Fans are seeing this and they're getting extremely pissed, more so than ever, to where it got to the point where they started throwing shit, they started charging the ring, and the wrestlers were in fear for their life and they had to run for their lives. So you can watch this anywhere. The stories are out there. You guys know the story of the Riot. I really don't need to go over it. I'm going to put a link in the description if you guys want to watch the Riot. It's on YouTube and I will have that set up in the bottom for you. So just click the link and watch it. There's a couple different versions online. But what was never discussed was the build-up to the Riot and why. So hopefully I was able to give you guys something different that you didn't hear, that you didn't know. The Riot itself is a spectacle, but the build-up to that Riot was where the pure gold was. That's what got the fans that hot, that mad, that fast. Normally, it's just a guy running to the ring, right? It's no big deal. It happens all the time. But there was a reason why, and that was the reason. All that heat from the Sheik and Furpo and Ox Baker coming in and killing the people, and there's their black hero getting, double teamed, triple teamed, and they were just, I had enough, I gotta save them. Because in the many eyes of people, wrestling was real, especially in 71, 2, 3. People didn't know, they weren't sure. Sure, people buzzed in their head, yeah, it might be, but a lot of people, there's a lot of gullible people. So, and to many people, that was legit. And they were going to kill Ernie Ladd and they were going to save him. That's passion. That's the power of kayfabe. That's what's missing. That's what we don't have. That's what you, the fuckface fans of today, killed for us because you want to expose everything. Well, now you expose the magic and the fun and the brilliance of it all. And wrestling anymore is meaningless. You took it away. And thank you for that. Rant over. What that did was let on a huge feud between Ox Baker and Ernie Ladd, one that would carry on for about a year. Again, coast to coast, everywhere they went, from Atlanta to Los Angeles, throughout the upper north, and also into Canada. The feud with Ox Baker and Ernie Ladd was tremendous, ending off in a chain match as well, as you can see on the cover of the Inside Wrestling August issue. And the feud was a hot one. They would also go at it again in the IWA years to come, because the NWF is about to change real soon. That was like their pinnacle in 1974 of this feud. Also stemming off, like I said, was the Sheik taking on Pampiro Firpo, and that would also end in a cage match as well for them in Los Angeles, and like I said, Detroit, all the way through the Midwest, out south. This feud carried on for a good several months, and Pampiro led into him capturing the title. So, how do you follow up with that? The company's now on dire straits. I don't know what the reason being, financially disgruntled, who knows, probably a little bit of both and all in between. Company's kind of fizzling out, but will reshape itself to come in the future. But still in NWF territory, and Johnny Powers now gets the cover. Johnny Powers, how he got even with the Sheik by using a snake, which would be quite becoming for the Sheik. And main page on the Inside Wrestling, April 1974. And here is Powers now with that python, and the Sheik apparently definitely afraid of snakes. Who knew, right? I guess the Sheik was definitely afraid of snakes. Sorry, Jake Roberts was not the first to use it. It was Johnny Powers in 1974. The match would continue on, and you would see the Sheik getting wrapped up in the snake, and pretty cool coverage of Johnny Powers and the Sheik. Powers now would be defending the NWF North American title in the Sheik's territory several times. He would also have a title versus title in that territory as well. A lot of that is covered in this issue of Inside Wrestling. Wrestling World, also the Sheik Powers continued their war, and here is more photos of Powers with the snake. and the snake getting all wrapped around the Sheik, who does not like it. More article here. All the information I'm reading to you is nothing that I know, nothing that I have, no knowledge. It's all magazine knowledge that I'm just spreading onto you. So everything I'm telling you is all written right down in these fine little history pieces here. But yep, so I think that's it for the color photos of the Sheik and Powers, summer of 1974. Breaking the curse of his fear of the snakes, the Sheik would adopt that python into his gimmick, thanks to Johnny Powers. Just a few months later, a year later, here is the Sheik once again now on the cover of the Body Press, which was the Sheik's Territory magazine program, and he now has the snake. He had did some kind of curse to whatever, and now the powers of the snake are beholding of the Sheik, and now he has the Sheik in his repertoire. 1975. Giant issue wrestling yearbook number 11, and I'm trying to find the tagline on the front page here. I think it's on here. Only these men could get Johnny Powers and Ernie Ladd to team up. Like, wait a minute, what? After that huge riot less than a year ago, who the hell can get them to team up? It would be none other than Abdullah the Butcher and the Sheik. Two most fearsome tag teams. I can't fit the whole thing in there, but Ernie Ladd and Johnny Powers, their hatred for each other was deeper. Wasn't as deep as their hatred for Abdullah the Butcher and the Sheik, and all that is covered in here. Fans did not know if there was going to be a double cross, if they were going to turn on each other again, and they certainly didn't. And the Sheik and Abdullah go down to Powers and Ladd, and Powers and Ladd are now friends again, and also back to being a babyface in all points of the NWF territory is Johnny Powers. Suddenly, the NWF has been visited by several Japanese wrestlers, Sakaguchi and also Antonio Inoki. Here is a program. Antonio Inoki was throughout Cleveland and Buffalo for several matches, along with Sakaguchi. Here is a program to the night Johnny Powers defended the title against Antonio Inoki. There's also a rematch photo here when he was the North American champion. And this is also a program, a ticket stub rather, both ticket stubs to Tiger Jeet Singh's title win over Inoki. So these are some ticket stubs from Japan. The title was soon to be moving to Japan, and Antonio Inoki would defeat Johnny Powers for the title, and the coverage of that match in full color is in this issue and of Gong, February 1974. And first announcement that hasn't hit the newsstands yet in America, but because our lag time, the Japanese issues were right up to date. They're within a week of the match, and we're about 3 or 4 months, sometimes even longer, before ours hit the stands, if it even gets mentioned at all. Here is Antonio Inoki's first magazine cover as the new NWF champion, and there's some color photos again inside. He would now defend the title against Ernie Ladd coming into Cleveland, and Ernie gets a shot at the title one more time. Former champion takes on the new world champion, and Antonio Inoki gets the pin over the big cat Ernie Ladd. Hard magazine to find, May of 1974. Good looking shot of Inoki with the NWF belt. The title would stay in Japan and continued to be covered, or defended rather, throughout Japan, and the NWF territory was just about finished. They still would have a handful of shows, and they would advertise as the NWF. Still had the TV going on at that point. The Wrestler, September 74, and it's talking about Ernie Ladd's match that we just seen from that May issue, and now this is what I say, September, several long months later, they announced the match between Ernie Ladd and Inoki, and here's Ladd when he was champion holding up the belt from the NWF, and that's mentioned in this issue of The Wrestler. Also, this issue of Wrestler June talks about Antonio Inoki owns the NWF title, literally because he bought the rights to the NWF and the NWF company and the belts. I shouldn't say belts, I should say belt. He bought the NWF World title. He did not keep the North American title. Johnny Powers now continues to defend the NWF North American title, even though the company is defunct and no longer in business. Wrestling Monthly, December 74, NWF ruler Antonio Inoki, true champion of the 70s. He's taken on Carl Gotch, one of his trainers, in the cover of Wrestling Monthly. Inoki, now I showed you the ticket stub just a little bit ago with Tiger Jeet Singh, and here it is on the bottom ticket stub, and he will win the title over Inoki, and here is his first magazine cover with the NWF belt. Getting major play now, becoming a big territory, the NWF. It is defended inside New Japan. What's nice about the Japanese is they defend titles with lineage. They don't just make up their, oh, this is the what is AEW, and it's the AEW World title. Well, what the hell is the AEW World title? It's a company belt. The Japanese go after titles with lineage who were champions before. So just because your name of your company is blah blah, that's not the name of your belt. Your belt has lineage, just like the AWA title is still defended today in Japan, like we discussed in our AWA video. The NWF title was still defended, and that history would go on quite a bit further. It would take a few dips and dives, but we'll discuss it in a second because we're almost at the end of the NWF's saga. Tiger Jeet Singh now posing for an 8x10 here. I think, yeah, here's another shot of Waldo on the back with the championship belt he held some years before, just 2 years before. Inside this wrestling issue of Gong, also will cover the Tiger Jeet Singh loss. He was now champion. Antonio Inoki would get the title back, I believe, 3 months later, and this has got some decent coverage of Inoki here, and also him getting the title back. The one thing I don't like is him raising the hand of Inoki at the end of the match. Come on, dude, don't do that shit. You're a heel, you're a vicious maniac. You come to the ring beating up the fans and slashing them with your saber, and now you're going to hold up Antonio's hand? Don't do that shit. You're a heel, stay a heel. Don't like that. Here it is in August of 1975's issue of Gong. Like I said, he would continue, that is Powers, to defend the NWF North American title, and he would defend that in the Sheik's territory, and he would also carry that along to the new company about to form, the IWA. And this is in Yearbook 1974. Stan Hansen would be the next guy to hold the NWF title, defeating Antonio Inoki in like 81. I forgot to bring the magazine here, damn. I had the magazine with him winning the belt. He was never on the cover with the belt, but here is an 8x10, so you get a feel. He's wearing the belt upside down, actually, right there, with Mr. Saito in his corner. The NWF belt would become part of the IWGP World belt, but not until a little bit later on. Inoki I don't know what you would say, he put it on a shelf for a while and decided to form his own world title, and that would be called the IWGP World title. That is, defended still to this day. In the beginning, it was a tournament, and it was a tournament for the first 3 years, and then it became a world title after several tournaments. The first champion of the IWGP was Hulk Hogan, and now, like I said, it is the NWF has merged in with the IWGP. Antonio Inoki would be the following year's champion, and he would continue to be that champion for the next several years to come until he, until his title run would be finished around 88 when Dragon Fujinami took the reins of that belt, and of course Van Vader and the Great Muta. The list goes on of great champions that held the IWGP. NWF would make a short resurgence in 2002. Inoki changing his style now from professional wrestling, making it more MMA based, thanks to the popularity of the fighting company Pride in Japan. Inoki absolutely loved the MMA craze, brought back the NWF title and made that the Strong Style Wrestling World Heavyweight Championship, and they had a tournament for it. The final tournament between the last four remaining contestants, and Takayama and Fuji Fujita would battle it out in the finals. Takayama would take the title from Fujita. Fujita was a full-time fighter in Pride. He was gunning for the title. He had a win over Mark Kerr and battled Mark Coleman. It was looking, I think he beat Ken Shamrock as well. Big, strong, solid dude. He had a head like a fucking cement block. Just couldn't hurt the guy. And too bad he didn't win the Pride Heavyweight Championship. But he would also not win the NWF belt. It would go to Takayama. I would have rather have seen Takayama was also a Pride fighter as well. Had that classic battle with Don Fry, where both were just standing there slugging each other in the face like 15 times and neither guy budging. That classic match. Great shit there. Like I said, Takayama would win. He would also win the new IWGP Heavyweight Championship. You see the belt style has changed. He would drop the IWGP title to Nakamura. Nakamura would take that belt. And a few weeks later, Nakamura would also take the NWF belt. And that would be the end of the line for the NWF for good. And this was in 2004, January 2004, Nakamura taking both titles. And the NWF once again officially merges in with the IWGP as one world championship belt. Several years later, about 5 or 6 or so, 2007, about 4 or 5 years, a commemorative magazine would come out from the NWF versus the NWA. It's not really a versus, it's just talking about the different titles and the different champions that were defended throughout Japan. There's a nice big shot of the belt, and it goes on to show some of the big matches, and it shows each champion in here as champ. Here was Inoki's first poster. It came with that gong issue that I showed you earlier. It came with a mini poster of this, holding the belt at the graveside of Ricky Dozan, giving thanks to his trainer and mentor and showing him the world title. And here's the champions of the NWF before: Victor Rivera, Dominic DeNucci, Abdullah the Butcher, Tiger Jeet Singh, Johnny Valentine, Waldo Von Erich, most of the guys we talked about earlier. It's all in this commemorative issue of the NWF. And nice to know that they show respect and honor to a company that had a deep history. It's just too bad it didn't catch on that big in America. I think they did a fantastic job for a small independent company. Now, moving on to Detroit, and throughout this whole time, the Sheik and the Sheik's guys were in and out of the NWF territory, and vice versa. They all interchanged each other, and they had their own magazine. So we're going to look at this from like 1975 point with the Sheik and also the IWA. I'm just going to go through the IWA first and then go through the Sheik's territory second. The IWA formed in the ashes of the NWF. Pedro Martinez, Ron Martinez's brother, and Johnny Powers would now all get together again and form the IWA. They took on they had another partner that kind of like was holding the company back and kind of fucked everything up for the company moving forward with some financial situations and the money situation that really wasn't being put to the right places. And the company would only be around for a couple of short years, but it would make a very big impact, just like the NWF was about to do. This is one of their basic programs. Their very first IWA champion now was Mil Mascaras. Johnny Powers was still defending the North American title throughout the different regions, and the North American title was about to become part of the IWA. Their first champion, I believe it was Ox Baker, and quickly over to Bulldog Brower. Here's an original promotional photo of Bulldog with the North American belt. The style has changed, very much like the Sheik style belt, but it's the same lineage that's followed by the NWF. The tag team titles were held by the Mongols. Nobody else held those titles except for the Mongols, and same with the world title that was only held by Mascaris. Here's a shot of the Masked Superstar as the Mongol here, and autographed by the Masked Superstar as Bolo Mongol. Mascaris now gaining some severe popularity. It was always extremely popular in the magazines. Now their NWF champion is selected as most popular wrestler of the year in the year-end awards in this issue of Wrestling Yearbook. One of the few, and maybe 1 or 2 years only, that they had the year-end awards in a yearbook. They would also have their own magazine, like I said, the Parade magazine. This is a program, and this is also a program for a huge night at the Roosevelt Stadium when they took on Ivan Koloff, and this is a pretty sought-after program by many people. And in this issue with Jack Briscoe on the cover is some color shots of that night at Roosevelt Stadium with Mascaris and Ivan Koloff. Some really good close-up coverage of the match in full color here. This is September 75's issue with Jack. It also has a poster. I'll try to get it in here. It's big, but I have this on my wall. So awesome trifold. It captures the rain falling down. Tommy Young, the NWA referee, now working, young Tommy Young, working for the IWA. And what a great looking poster this is that the Japanese people got. Very lucky, their fans. All that is in this issue, September, of Pro Wrestling Monthly. Mascaris would continue to light up the magazines. Here he is again with his title. IWA is making some big waves. And after the Roosevelt Stadium match, another Roosevelt Stadium match took place with Ernie Ladd and the wrestler covering that issue. Inside this mud match issue with the Sheik and Tiger Jeet Singh. I mean, I guess we could look at that a second if you want. They had a mud match, Indian mud match. Great looking shot here of the mud all over the Sheik. I believe this match took place up in Canada. I think that's where it was. I didn't really read over this because I really wasn't planning on showing it. What I wanted to show was the match with Ernie Ladd at Roosevelt Stadium, and against Mil Mascaris, and a couple of good-looking color shots that you weren't able to get in our magazines of some in-action shot, great shot of Mascaris flying across the ring, and Mascaris would defend that title with success. Mascaris now again on the cover of The Wrestler, this time in a match with Larry Heinemimi, also known as Lars Anderson. Kind of looks like Blackjack Mulligan at a quick glance. June of 1976 would get one of the last IWA matches to don the cover of an Apter mag, and any mag for that matter. Mascaris again now taking on Eric the Red. This is winter of 1976. And Eric the Red now, formerly Eric the Animal in the NWF. And gets a great looking shot. I've always loved this cover. I just thought it was a great looking, classic 70s looking cover. Mascaris now gets a full story on the small corner shot here of his career in pictures with the championship belt after winning the title. Mascaris again, November 76. Here he is signing autographs. Fans all around the front of him. The good old great days of when fans could run to the ring and get your stuff signed by the baby faces. Of course, the heel would literally tell you to get the fuck away from you. And that's exactly what I was told by several heels. The first one being actually Bob Bradley. Remember the jobber from the WWF? I couldn't believe it. I was like, what? This guy's told me to get the fuck away from him? And also Mel Phillips, that prick told me he's going to break my fucking arms and legs if I don't get away from the ring. I'm like, what? I remember telling my father and my uncle, and they're like, stay away from that asshole. But, you were allowed to run up to the ring, and you were allowed to do shit. And I guess we stood there a little bit too long. I was just in complete shock that he said something like that to me. I wasn't ready for that kind of response. I was like, what? Mascaris once again on the cover, April 76 with the championship gold. And going into 77, and Mascaris now making his way, the IWA closed shortly after one of the Roosevelt shows, and now Mil Mascaras is conquering New York, and he's in the WWF, but continuing to make the covers of the magazines and with that gold belt. He would continue to use that belt throughout through the 80s and then beyond, never losing the belt. He kept the belt, and it became part of his gimmick wherever he went, defending his world belt. But he's at the Garden now in the WWF, challenging Superstar Graham for the WWF title that he would never get. And one last shot of Mascaras here in '77. Enter Detroit, and like I said, Detroit was a territory, an NWA territory all on its own, but did a lot of work in the NWF in Pittsburgh, Buffalo, Cleveland. They had their own base. They also did a lot of work up in Canada, and a lot. I wanted to take a second to showcase three of the main people who were responsible for giving us these great magazine covers and great photos of the Sheik. Right here is my buddy Gary Mancuso, where a lot of my material has come from. I've been cherry picking Gary's stuff for over a decade or longer. Brian Bucantis here, who has the late Brian Bucantis, who has passed away, also responsible for some phenomenal photos, and he was also the editor of the Body Press magazine. And Handsome Gary, what's up, Gary? Gary is also a friend of the channel and chimes in from time to time. These three Detroit area, Illinois area legends brought us some great stuff from Dick the Bruiser's territory and the Sheik's both, and the battling through the Detroit territory. Big thanks to all them. And here is the Sheik posing for a photo. Remember I said before in one of the videos, a Sheik never posed for a magazine cover, but the Sheik respected these three guys, and he did some posing for these dudes, as long as they didn't put it on a cover, I guess, right? These are just some photos I had gotten from Gary Mancuso over the years, and my buddy's always hooked me up with some great stuff, and these are some photos that are his personal photos, and just some really candid, cool shots. I got a bunch more. I just grabbed a couple that I thought I would show today, and some of these may look familiar. Here's another one, Bruno and Bobo, when they were a tag team in the WWF. Great shot again here of the bloody Sheik with Bobo's hands wrapped around his throat. Bobo as the U.S. champion, the Sheik with the old style belt, and Bobo again. And my buddy Gary actually signed the cover of this book for me. I cannot recommend these books enough. I love them. Some of the pictures are a little bit blurred if I only had to pick on one thing, but who gives a shit? Look past it. It's got great information, great material in here. These this Saturday Night book, volume 1 and 2, were excellent. They got newspaper clippings from all over the Detroit territory, Cobo Hall, and it's just cool stuff like this that you just can't find anywhere else, that you won't see anywhere else. Just cool, different. There's a ton of photos in here as well, but just if you've never seen this book and you're on the fence about getting one, it's got pictures of the old Body Press programs. It's got lineup sheets from the different matches that took place, different personal stuff, along with huge photos and a huge photo book inside the Cobo nights in Detroit. Thanks again, my buddy Gary, for hooking me up with some great stuff. You've been a really good friend to me over the years, and I appreciate you, appreciate Brian, and appreciate Handsome Gary for all you guys, the unsung heroes that gave us all this great shit. This is another one. This is another book. Brian Bucantis had gotten this book, Wrestling Review, the rights to Wrestling Review. And what I like about this issue in particular is it covers every champion that held the title in Detroit and who beat the Sheik. And people say, the Sheik didn't lose very much. He was, hogged the title. He lost it a ton, and well, not a ton, but he lost it quite a bit. And there was a lot of champions there. The guys who held the U.S. title, Johnny Valentine, the Sheik, Bobo Brazil, Pampiro Firpo, Mark Lewin, Tony Marino, Johnny Valentine again, Johnny for the third time, Abdullah the Butcher, Don Kent, Ox Baker, the Mighty Igor, Gino Hernandez. I mean, the list goes on of guys who held the Sheik's U.S. title. So you really can't say there was no other champions there. It was always the Sheik. I'm sick of seeing the Sheik. There's always the Sheik and Bobo. Yeah, there was a lot of it, but it wasn't only that. It gets a bad rap. If you look at Bruno Sammartino in the course of 15 years, he lost it once. So you look at the Sheik, they had, I just named a dozen champions that were there. So this little magazine slash book, which was brought back to life, is all about the Detroit territory and Cobo Hall and the matches that took place at Cobo Hall. And here's a shot of Brian Bucantas now wearing the Sheik's belt. I mean, talk about being close to the Sheik. I guess he was. Who the fuck can say they were able to put the Sheik's belt around their waist? Cool little magazines like this. It came back to life in like 2001 or 2. There was about 7 or 8 issues. I have mostly all of them, and this was another one that I really enjoyed for that history piece of the champions. They had their own body press magazine. Like I said, Brian was running that magazine. We all seen these in my collection before. Here's one with a nice ticket stub, ringside seat, $3. The other seats I think were $2. And this is in 1970, the Sheik taking on Bobo. I was just talking about another one from 71, the Sheik and Tex McKenzie. So in 71, they were also battling in the NWF, and here they are continuing to battle in Detroit. 1971 again in October, taking on Tiger Jeet Singh is the Sheik. And like I said, these guys would battle throughout, and the NWF and also Detroit. Sheik also making his way out to for a title shot against John Tolos for the Americas title in Los Angeles. Here's a program of the Sheik invading. Sheik also held that title as well. He just didn't beat Tolos on this night. Now, I mentioned Brian Bucantas, and he had a magazine called the Arena Magazine, along with Gary Mancuso. Gary would take over this magazine, and Brian would strictly be working on an issue called Stranglehold. These are really rare, hard to find. I have another one with Pampiro Firpo on the cover. I think another one with Bobo Brazil. If you can find these, you're probably going to pay a pretty decent penny. I love them because they're small, they're independent, and it's just dedicated to, the Olympia and Cobo Hall's territory. And I think Gary said, he would sell these outside of the Cobo Arena until the Sheik caught on and told him to get the hell out, stop selling that shit in my place. So I had to take it elsewhere. It was only in circulation for a short time. When Brian left the Arena magazine, he started one called Stranglehold, and this was one from the Dick the Bruiser's territory, covering mostly Dick the Bruisers. I have like half a dozen of these. Here's just a couple, and also with the Valiants on the cover. There's a little sticky piece on the back there. Stranglehold in 74, this is January 74, would soon later be taken over by the Wrestling News. And Wrestling News would have their Stranglehold edition, and that'll become in a magazine form. Still mail away, or still an Arena magazine at this point. Wrestling News wouldn't be on the newsstands until issue number 61 is when it started hitting the stands for mass consumption. And this is just at number 27, still in a territory Arena magazine. Some interesting coverage for the Sheik in this 1972 issue of The Wrestler, and this is probably one of the best magazines ever covering the Sheik. I believe there's 20 or 22 pages dedicated to the Sheik in this magazine. The Sheik, This Is Your Life. Some early shots of him. Looks very much like Sabu here. Wanted to point out a few important things that are incorrect. Here's the Sheik here with his first championship belt. It says the Sheik, when he was a young man, made his American wrestling debut, and he's here with the Arabian Championship title belt around his waist. That is not the Arabian Championship belt. There's no such thing as the Arabian Championship belt. This is the NWA Mid-America Midwest heavyweight title, and here is the Sheik on the inside the wrestling magazine, Wrestling Life, and here is, and this is 1960 or 59. The Sheik here, he won the belt in 58. I'm not sure the date. I don't see the date on the front cover, but it talks about the Sheik holding the title and being stripped of it. So it says, I won the title in Chicago in 1958. The next year, the promoters stripped me of the title and took the title away from me for being too violent and too extreme and not worthy of the title belt. There's no way of taking a title. The only way to take a title is by pinfall or submission. But the point of the matter is, this is the NWA Midwest Championship belt, Sheik's first title in 1958. Real rare shot of him, and he's also here with the turban on before the headdress, and a rare shot of the Sheik here. He is also on the cover of only one magazine with that, and this is a Capital Wrestling Corporation wrestling fan scrapbook. It's mostly like a photo album. Try to find another one of these suckers, or they're almost non-existent. But the Sheik is on the front cover here with that belt, the Midwest belt here, and good looking shot of everybody on the cover. And like I said, on the back, it's just got the Capital Wrestling Corporation information. Those magazines are hard to find too. There were the WWF's magazine before there were the WWF. But just wanted to straighten that out. They can put anything they want in the fiction magazines, the after issues. A lot of the information is incorrect. But some great looking shots of the Sheik here, and some rare pictures that you really don't see very often. Now, here is another one. The Sheik here, after winning the WWA Los Angeles heavyweight title, he would beat, I'm trying to see what this issue says here. It doesn't say who he's beating. But they're calling it, anyway, they're calling it the Sheik's U.S. belt. It's not the Sheik's U.S. belt. It's the Sheik's win of the Los Angeles America's title. And it is super hard to find a picture of him with that belt, wearing that belt. To this day, I've never seen one, and I've always looked, continue to look. There's got to be one, but what a rare shot it is. And he would soon later drop the title. Mascaras would take the title, not next, or it may have been next. I'm not sure of the history on that, but if it wasn't next, Mascaras beat the next person after the Sheik, and this is what the belt looked like. And this is the U.S. title. I'm sorry, the America's title that they're calling the U.S. title incorrectly once again. Those little things drive me nuts because I know different and I know what the belts are. I'm like a maniac with the belts, and I'm very fanatical about that. And I know what the belts are and where they're from. And when I see it, that's not printed right, you're giving the wrong information to people, and it pisses me off. But again, the Sheik goes on and on. Here he is with Bruno Sammartino in the Boston Garden. It's just endless, and more so with Freddie Blassie in his world. It continues on with several more pages. You're a fan of the Sheik, you got to own this issue. I had upgraded this issue because mine was so beat up because I had it from when I was a kid in the 70s. I recently bought one maybe about a year ago or so after seeing how shitty up my other one was. They're not really that cheap either, but you just got to be patient and find the right seller who's dropping it. The Sheik would continue battling in Los Angeles. Here he is with John Tolis, and we just showed the program to this match. Now here is the magazine covering that match. You can see the Olympic Auditorium right here, the notorious sign in the background. Another great issue covering the Sheik in '72. Another shot taken by Gary Mancuso, who we just seen a little while ago. This is his photo on the cover of Big Book. And there is about 8 or 10 pages of the Sheik, 7 big pages packed with the Sheik information and title wins and blah, blah, and records throughout his wrestling career. Wrestling Sports Stars of 72, another great cover of the Sheik. 73, we're climbing up to like 75 or 77, just showing what the Sheik was doing during this NWF time, in and out of the different territories, now taking on John Tolis, getting bit in the head. I thought I would show a couple of magazines that I don't show very often, some of the lesser popular issues covering the Sheik. Great looking cover. Always enjoyed this cover of the Sheik walking out from behind the curtain. And a rare issue, wasn't a wrestling magazine, it was a sports magazine, hockey, football, but they did a wrestling special in '73, and this one covers the Pedro Morales and Sheik battle in the WWF for the title. Rare coverage of that. There's also some color pictures in there, I believe. If you see that one, try to grab it. Sheik is now up in Canada, taking on Don Leo Jonathan here, along with the UFO. On I think that was Grand Prix Wrestling TV. I remember seeing the UFO on television on some TV tapings. The Sheik would have his first tour in Japan. His very first match would be a title match against Sakaguchi, and he would win the title, the NWA United Heavyweight Championship belt. His first match in the land of the rising sun, and it's a title win. That really put his name on the map in Japan. They're like, wow, this is somebody to take notice. Who comes in and beats the #2 guy in New Japan in Sakaguchi and for the title? And that was the Sheik. He didn't hold it long, but nonetheless, he held the title. He would lose it, before he went back to the States after his couple-week run. Here he is against throwing fire into the referee's face, Red Shoes, and he got, this is the dedication of kayfabe. Some sandpaper and brushing the side of his face to make it look like it was burned, and then take a couple of photos here for the magazines to look like he was really scorched. I mean, that's really going the extra mile. That's how protected and how important the power of kayfabe was, and keeping it the way it was for so many years. And you don't realize how bad you fucked it up until after you fucked it up, and you certainly did a great job at fucking it up. January of 1975 with Wrestling Monthly, another rare shot of the Sheik, not a magazine you don't see very often. These were pretty much every other month until like the mid-70s, and then they became every month. Another body press issue with Abdullah the Butcher takes on Vampiro Firpo, and he wins. Abdullah wins the title here. This is January 22nd, 1975. Another shot of the Sheik in 75, just talking about his barbaric ways in wrestling. Here is the first time ever the new style of the U.S. belt was being presented on the cover of a magazine, Ben Strong, June 1975. And that's your first look at it's in this book here we just showed. You can see here, Sheik is having a match with Andre the Giant. Sam Munchnick flew in from St. Louis headquarters of the National Wrestling Alliance to present the winner of the bout, the brand new style of the United States Heavyweight Championship. And here is the new style belt that's going to be given to the winner of the Andre the Giant match in 1974. I believe it was the summer of 74. And here at the table, Lord Layton and also Sam Munchnick is here, and the belt is on the table with the timekeeper, Andre, coming into the ring. Match taking place. The Sheik would lose the match by disqualification, but he would also be the holder of the new belt. If you're wondering what I was holding the magazine page open with, just so I could find it, it was the night the Sheik beat Onita for the FMW World Heavyweight Champion, which was called the WWA World Heavyweight Championship belt. This would be the Sheik's last World Championship belt when he was ruler of the FMW. Rare shot of the Sheik here with that big belt. But back to this issue would be the first time that this would be seen in the public. It will be on the June 75's issue. Probably hit the newsstands around February of 75, just shortly after the Sheik took the match from Andre the Giant. Great looking magazine, hard one to find. I know Eric K has said he's always wanted that. You know what, dude, I should really give you one because I have it. I have two of them, and you've been such a cool dude to the channel. If you're listening, if you want it, you know my email address. Email me. I'll give you my old copy. I'm going to keep the good one though. All right, buddy. June of 75 Wrestling Review, taking on Don Leo once again, and another monumental match. The Sheik and Andre the Giant. No, this isn't the match that he got the title belt from. This is the last man standing match, the infamous last man standing. The Sheik and Andre the Giant. Andre's just breaking into the American scene, known as the undefeated Giant. The Sheik, the undefeated U.S. champion, who was going to win. Everyone believing Andre was going to take the title. And last man standing means nobody gets pinfalled and nobody gets submitted. It's whoever's down and can't continue anymore. No more than a couple of punches by either man. Sheik looks to be getting pounded by the Giant. Ball of fire goes in the Giant's face. This match took place up in Toronto, and it was known as the match that pissed off a lot of fans and turned a lot of people off to the Sheik's territory and tired of seeing him always win when he should have probably lost to Andre the Giant. Problem is, he would have to lose the belt back to Andre the Giant, and Andre is going to go undefeated. Even though he's been defeated a shitload of times up until this point throughout France and London and Canada. But the myth of Andre the Giant would go as undefeated until Hulk Hogan, and we all know the truth about that. But another good issue, and a historical issue here as well. Another body press issue, Macho Man Savage as Randy Poffo, as we discussed, but it's the Sheik taking on Pampiro Firpo for the title. Another sports review shot with the Sheik and that fire, as we see, wins many matches with that fire, talking about should he be banned from wrestling because throwing fire. Sheik and Bobo Brazil at it again, spilling blood everywhere they go. And the Sheik riding into 1977 and finishing it out with the last couple issues, him and Andre the Giant on Sports Review, and Victory Sports Annual taking on the Harley Race for the NWA World title. So, there it is, a little known company called the NWF. A lot of great history there. It's never talked about. The only discussion it's ever really mentioned is the Riot, and the Aftermags didn't cover the Riot. They say they covered the Riot. They covered the pre-Riot, the build-up to the Riot, but there's nothing with Baker and that Riot photographed in any of the magazines that at least I could find, unless I missed it, and I'm usually pretty good at that. But the build-up was certainly there. The build-up was never discussed, so hopefully I gave you a little background story to fill in your education on the what went down in Cleveland that one night. And thanks for joining me on this hour and 20-minute video of the NWF. Die-hard, kick-ass Cleveland, Buffalo, Pittsburgh fans. You had some great wrestling in your territory. There still continues to be passionate fans there, and you guys are not forgotten about on this channel especially. You'll always be a great wrestling territory in town, just like Philly and just like the Garden. Cleveland, Buffalo, Pittsburgh is no different. All right, guys, we'll see you on the next.